policies. Gay men were not to be accepted, and if they were in the army, they were to be discharged dishonorably.
In exploring the grotesque atrocities inflicted upon gay men during the Nazi regime, we unveil a horrifying chapter of human history. Aiming to shed light on the countless lives marred by unthinkable cruelty, this video portrays 15 disturbing facets of the Nazi persecution of gay men. By acknowledging this dark past, we hope to foster a more compassionate and tolerant future. Let us delve into the stomach-churning truths of this time period. Number 1. Identification and arrest. During the sinister reign of the Nazis, a perverse and systematic targeting of homosexual men was, in effect, one rooted in virulent homophobia and a sickening disregard for human dignity. Beginning with the identification and arrest of gay men, the Nazis utilized various means to pinpoint individuals who were suspected of engaging in homosexual activities. From an Orwellian surveillance of social circles to a meticulous perusal of personal correspondences, no stone was left unturned in their zealous quest to rid society of what they considered an undesirable group. In the early 1930s, Heinrich Himmler, one of the leading figures of the Nazi regime, spearheaded the campaign against homosexuals with a voracious appetite for cruelty. The Gestapo, the official secret police of Nazi Germany, played a pivotal role in identifying and arresting gay men, often relying on a network of informants and conducting sting operations to entrap individuals. Personal letters, photographs, and other materials were scrutinized for any indications of homosexual relationships. Men were betrayed by friends, neighbors, and even family members in a climate of fear and paranoia. As they were arrested, many were forced to endure humiliating medical examinations designed to prove their homosexuality, a process that was both scientifically baseless and morally reprehensible. The Nazi machinery, in its pursuit to erase homosexuality from the German society, operated with a ruthlessness that stripped these individuals of their humanity, treating them not as beings capable of love and affection, but as criminals deserving of the harshest punishments. Thus, the process of identification and arrest marked the beginning of a harrowing journey for many gay men during the Nazi regime, a journey marked by unspeakable atrocities, relentless suffering, and the darkest corners of human cruelty. Number 2. Interrogation methods. The Nazis' vendetta against gay men wasn't limited to identification and arrest. The horrifying journey was marked by brutal interrogation methods designed to extract information and further demean the detainees. The Gestapo, adept at torture and psychological manipulation, utilized a range of horrific techniques to force confessions and gather information about other potential targets. The individuals arrested were taken to interrogation centers where they were subjected to inhumane treatment. Often, they were severely beaten, with the interrogators paying no heed to the physical boundaries or moral decency. These beatings were sometimes coupled with other forms of physical torture, such as waterboarding, electric shocks, and other gruesome methods aimed at breaking the spirit of the detainee. The goal of these interrogations was not only to extract information, but to further stigmatize and isolate gay men within society. The Nazi regime wanted to make an example out of these individuals, using their suffering as a deterrent to others who might be hiding their sexual orientation. This crusade of fear was cultivated and sustained through these brutal interrogations, a terror campaign aimed at the annihilation of the gay community in Nazi Germany. During these interrogations, individuals were coerced into naming acquaintances and partners, thus expanding the net of terror and marking more people for arrest and persecution. This created a vicious cycle of distrust and fear, with no end to the suffering in sight. As we explore this chapter of the Nazis' atrocities against gay men, the depths of human cruelty and the absolute abandonment of empathy and kindness stand glaringly evident, an undeniable testament to the perverse agenda pursued by the Nazi regime. Number 3. Incarceration conditions. Upon the grim threshold of incarceration, the individuals who had been ruthlessly hunted down faced conditions that were nothing short of hellish. The Nazis' campaign against gay men spiraled into a vortex of hatred and cruelty within the confines of prisons and concentration camps, where the incarcerated were stripped of their dignity, humanity, and ultimately, their lives. The conditions in these facilities were meticulously crafted to inflict maximum suffering. Cells were often overcrowded, with inmates given scarcely enough room to lie down. The sanitation facilities were woefully inadequate, breeding ground for diseases that would ravage weakened bodies. Nutrition was minimal, as detainees were provided with meager rations that barely sustained life, let alone health. But the cruelty was not merely physical. The Nazis sought to break the spirits of these individuals, subjecting them to relentless humiliation and dehumanization. Gay men were singled out for particularly brutal treatment, forced to wear a pink triangle that marked them as targets for further abuse. This insignia, meant to degrade and stigmatize, became a grim symbol of the persecution they faced. And amid this relentless horror, there existed moments of quiet courage and solidarity. Within the confines of their suffering, some managed to find fleeting moments of humanity, a stolen glance or a comforting word, fleeting reminders of the vibrant lives they once led, and the human capacity for love and kindness, even in the face of unfathomable cruelty. Thus, the incarceration conditions experienced by gay men under the Nazi regime were a dark symphony of physical and psychological torture, a stark testament to the depths of human cruelty and depravity. Number 4. Forced labor in concentration. In the grotesque machinery of the Nazi concentration camps, forced labor became a defining element of the persecution faced by gay men. Deemed as unworthy of life, these individuals were subjected to an unyielding regimen of backbreaking labor under the most horrendous conditions imaginable, a torment carefully orchestrated by the Nazi regime to strip away any lingering fragments of hope and human dignity. The labor camps were meticulously designed to exploit every ounce of energy from the inmates, reducing them to mere cogs in a monstrous wheel of hatred and discrimination. Gay men, identified by the pink triangle sewn onto their prison uniforms, were often assigned to the hardest, most grueling tasks, as the Nazis sought to break their spirits through relentless physical toil. Despite the relentless brutality, many displayed a resilient spirit, clinging to fragments of hope and humanity amidst the darkness. They formed secret bonds and alliances, a flicker of light in a world consumed by darkness, a testament to the enduring human spirit even under the most harrowing circumstances. In this chapter of horror and cruelty, forced labor in concentration camps stands as a chilling testament to the systematic dehumanization and brutalization faced by gay men during the Nazi regime, a dark period marked by unspeakable cruelty and relentless inhumanity. Number 5. Medical experiments. In the horrific timeline of the Nazi regime, an unspeakably dark chapter unfolds in the form of medical experiments inflicted upon gay men, amongst other groups. These experiments represented not only a gross violation of human rights, but a blatant abandonment of the core principles of medical ethics and humanity. These experiments were conducted in various concentration camps where medical professionals, having forfeited their oaths to protect and heal, embarked upon a horrifying journey into the depths of human cruelty. These medical practitioners conducted a wide range of experiments that sought to both validate the Nazis' perverse ideologies and further their knowledge in the field of medicine, albeit through grotesque means. These experiments were conducted with a shocking level of cruelty, with no regard for the suffering inflicted upon these men. They were viewed not as individuals with rights and dignity, but as expendable subjects in a gruesome pursuit of knowledge and supremacy. It was a horrifying display of how easily ethics and humanity could be cast aside in the pursuit of perverse objectives. Through this dark journey into the heart of Nazi medical experimentation, we witness the unspeakable cruelty and inhumanity that marked this period of history, a chilling testament to the depths of depravity that human beings can sink to when consumed by hatred and bigotry. Number 6. Public humiliation and stigmatization. In the totalitarian grasp of Nazi Germany, gay men not only faced the torture of labor camps and gruesome medical experiments, but were also subjected to a campaign of public humiliation and stigmatization that sought to degrade and dehumanize them at every turn. A deeply entrenched social disdain for homosexuality gave rise to a terrifying atmosphere where public humiliation was not only endorsed, but actively encouraged, serving as a horrifying tool in the Nazis' arsenal of oppression. In the streets, in newspapers, and through propaganda, The Nazi regime depicted gay men as subhuman, a danger to the purported purity and strength of the German race. These narratives played a pivotal role in encouraging the widespread social ostracization of gay men. They were cast as enemies of the state, a contagion that threatened to undermine the moral fiber of the society. This propaganda was relentless, pervading every aspect of daily life, fueling prejudice and hatred amongst the general populace. This period serves as a stark reminder of the terrible consequences of hatred and prejudice, a chilling testament to the depth of cruelty and barbarism that can manifest when a society allows itself to be consumed by the darkness of bigotry and discrimination. Through the unspeakable horrors of public humiliation and stigmatization, we glimpse the tragic erosion of humanity that marked the lives of gay men during the Nazi regime, a dark chapter in human history that stands as a solemn warning for generations to come. Number 7. Physical violence and torture. The narrative of Nazi Germany's reign of terror remains incomplete without addressing the horrific physical violence and torture that gay men were subjected to. In a regime that thrived on brutality and the subjugation of those it deemed undesirable, the extent of the violence meted out to gay men is a testament to the depths of cruelty that the Nazi regime was willing to plunge into. During this bleak period, gay men found themselves ensnared in a relentless cycle of violence that seemed to know no bounds. Detained in police stations, prisons, and concentration camps, they experienced brutality that defied imagination. The SS guards and police officers assigned to oversee them often took sadistic pleasure in their suffering, utilizing an array of torture methods that were both gruesome and agonizing. Yet, in the face of this relentless brutality, many gay men demonstrated a remarkable resilience, an unwillingness to be broken by the cruelty that surrounded them. In the darkest corners of these hellish places, they found the strength to support one another, to offer moments of kindness and solidarity amidst the horror. This chapter paints a grim picture of the relentless physical violence and torture that gay men endured during the Nazi regime. A brutal campaign of hatred and cruelty that sought to strip them of their humanity and dignity, leaving indelible scars on the pages of history. Number 8. Psychological abuse and manipulation. In the oppressive shadows cast by the Nazi regime, psychological abuse and manipulation festooned the daily lives of gay men, subjecting them to a relentless assault on their mental and emotional well-being. This form of abuse, often overshadowed by physical atrocities, was a calculated tactic employed to fracture the psyche of these individuals, leaving them vulnerable and shattered, further cementing their tormentors' control over them. The Nazis wielded psychological abuse like a finely honed weapon, using techniques that were as sophisticated as they were sinister. These methods were often insidious, weaving into the daily lives of the victims, making it nearly impossible to escape the relentless grip of fear and degradation. Mock executions, persistent threats of violence, and relentless humiliation were commonplace, designed to strip these men of their dignity and self-worth. Moreover, they were subjected to manipulation that sought to pit them against one another, fostering an environment of mistrust and paranoia, effectively isolating them and preventing any form of solidarity or mutual support. This toxic environment was calculated to break down any form of resistance, forcing these individuals into a state of perpetual vulnerability and fear. As we delve into this dark chapter of history, we witness the horrendous psychological warfare waged upon gay men during the Nazi regime. It stands as a chilling testament to the human capacity for cruelty, showcasing the devastating impacts of psychological abuse and manipulation, a facet of the Holocaust that inflicted wounds as deep and lasting as any physical torture, leaving scars that lingered long after the physical bruises had healed. Number 9. Sexual violence and exploitation. In the midst of the Nazi reign of terror, another deeply disturbing facet of the persecution against gay men was the rampant sexual violence and exploitation that they endured. These acts of barbarism were not isolated occurrences, but a systemic and orchestrated campaign to further dehumanize and violate these individuals in the most horrific manner imaginable. In the concentration camps and prisons that dotted the Nazi-controlled territories, gay men were often subjected to sexual violence at the hands of their captors and sometimes even fellow prisoners. These acts were marked by a perverse cruelty, a blatant demonstration of power and dominance that sought to reduce these men to nothing more than objects for the sadistic pleasures of their tormentors. But amid the darkness of these horrifying experiences, there were glimpses of resilience and solidarity. Even in the face of such unimaginable cruelty, some managed to retain a semblance of their humanity, supporting one another in a bid to survive the daily horrors they were subjected to. Their resilience stands as a beacon of light in a time overshadowed by the most heinous expressions of human cruelty. As we explore this painful chapter, we are confronted with the depths of depravity that marked the Nazi regime, a period where sexual violence and exploitation were wielded as tools of terror, leaving an indelible stain on human history. It serves as a grim reminder of the extent of human cruelty and the urgent necessity to remember and learn from these dark chapters of our past to ensure such horrors are never repeated. Number 10. Execution and euthanasia. As the sun set on the lives of countless individuals during the Nazi regime, gay men were often ushered silently toward execution and euthanasia, a dark testament to the endgame of a regime built on hatred and prejudice. The atrocities did not only unfold within the harsh perimeters of concentration camps, but also in isolated corners, where the Nazi machinery operated with a lethal efficiency to eradicate those they considered as undesirables. The methods of execution were numerous and brutal. Many faced firing squads, a quick yet terrifying end, while others were led to the gallows, their last moments punctuated by the jeering and disdain of their captors. The machinery of death worked relentlessly, with gas chambers serving as factories of death, where humans were reduced to mere numbers in a gruesome tally of extermination. As we venture into this grim chapter of history, we bear witness to the horrifying end that awaited many gay men during the Nazi era. Their stories, their suffering, and their untimely deaths serve as a grim reminder of the depths of cruelty and inhumanity that can manifest in society when hatred and bigotry are allowed to fester unbridled. It is a solemn call for vigilance, for remembrance, and for a collective commitment to ensure that such darkness never engulfs humanity again, honoring the memory of those who perished by fostering a world rooted in empathy, understanding, and respect for all. Number 11. Forced sterilizations and castrations. A harrowing chapter in the Nazi persecution of gay men is the appalling practice of forced sterilizations and castrations. These invasive procedures were carried out with a ruthless efficiency, forming part of a larger agenda to purify the Aryan race by eliminating what was perceived as undesirable genetic material. Gay men, caught in this brutal crusade, faced medical procedures that were not only physically agonizing, but carried profound psychological ramifications. As we reflect on this period of history, we are confronted with the grim reality of a regime that wielded science and medicine as tools of oppression and cruelty. The experiences of gay men subjected to forced sterilizations and castrations reveal the darkest corners of human capability, showcasing a horrifying disregard for the sanctity of human life and the most fundamental rights of individuals. It serves as a warning, echoing through time, urging us to remain vigilant against the forces of hatred and prejudice that can distort the very essence of humanity. Number 12. Social ostracization. In Nazi Germany, the twisted ideologies propelled not just brutal physical persecution, but also systematic social ostracization aimed at gay men. The societal alienation was multifaceted, involving scorn, discrimination, and the cruel severance of familial and community bonds. Being labeled as asocial, they were isolated from the society, with their basic human rights stripped away. Relationships crumbled, as affiliations with them were seen as a taint. This vile societal setup served not only to punish gay men, but also to deter others, creating an environment where hatred and bigotry thrived, further fueling the fire of the Nazi agenda. The Nazis wielded medical interventions as yet another tool of oppression, using forced sterilizations and castrations as means to annihilate the dignity and bodily autonomy of gay men. These procedures were not only a gross violation of human rights, but were conducted under the most horrific of circumstances, often resulting in severe complications, infections, and even death. It was a campaign grounded in the false belief of purging undesirable traits from the human gene pool, a grotesque manifestation of the Nazis' racial purity dogma. This barbaric act further marginalized gay men, as they were subjected to humiliation and disdain, their bodies becoming the battlefields in the Nazis' perverse war against an imagined enemy. This horrendous chapter reflects the Nazis' diabolical endeavor to exert control and manifest their twisted ideologies, with a cruelty that knew no bounds. The scars left behind were not only physical but penetrated deep into the psyche, leaving lasting imprints of trauma and despair. It stands as a grim testament to the inhumane lengths to which regimes can go in their pursuit of a warped vision, a bitter lesson from history urging us to safeguard humanity against such atrocities in the future. Number 13. Nazi propaganda and demonization of homosexuality. The malignant grip of Nazi propaganda stretched far and wide, seeping into the crevices of society, shaping perceptions and fueling a widespread demonization of homosexuality. Through meticulous and relentless campaigns, the Nazis fostered an environment where gay men were not only ostracized, but vilified, their existences reduced to something less than human in the eyes of the public. The propaganda machine operated with a frightening efficacy, churning out materials that painted gay men as enemies of the state, threats to the purported purity and strength of the Aryan race. They were depicted as corrupters of youth, bearers of disease, and as individuals with morally depraved characters, leveraging deep-seated prejudices to further marginalize and demonize them. This portrayal was not confined to adult populations, but was instilled in children as well, breeding a new generation nurtured on hatred and bigotry. As we traverse through this somber chapter of history, we witness the terrifying power of propaganda, the capacity of carefully crafted narratives to alter perceptions and engender hatred on a mass scale. It reminds us of the duty to remain vigilant, to critically assess information, and to foster empathy and understanding so that the horrors born from such demonization remain firmly anchored in the past, never to resurface in the annals of human history again. Number 14. Persecution of homosexuals in occupied territories. During the dark times of Nazi rule, the persecution of gay men was not confined to Germany but extended ruthlessly into the occupied territories, illustrating the comprehensive scale of the cruelty perpetrated by the regime. Gay men in these areas faced an increased escalation of brutality as the Nazis sought to imprint their ideology of hate and discrimination upon diverse populations, eradicating what they perceived as impurities within the societal fabric. Across the occupied territories, gay men were hunted down with a vicious zeal. Their existence was criminalized, their freedoms snatched away, leaving them to navigate a world where their very identities marked them for persecution. The Nazis employed various tactics, including surveillance and infiltration of gay communities, using fear and betrayal as tools to tighten their grip on these vulnerable populations. As we delve into this haunting period, we must remember that the persecution of gay men in the occupied territories stands as a testament to the extent of the Nazis' inhumanity. A sweeping campaign of terror that sought to obliterate the dignity and existence of gay men across a vast and diverse geographical canvas. It serves as a chilling reminder of the atrocities that can unfold when hatred is allowed to dictate policy and action, urging us to stand united against the forces of bigotry and discrimination, wherever they may manifest. Number 15. Post-war silence and neglect. In the aftermath of the war, the world was left to grapple with the horrifying realities of the atrocities perpetrated by the Nazi regime. However, despite the revelations of unimaginable cruelties and the loss of countless lives, the experiences of gay men remained veiled in a shroud of silence and neglect, adding another layer of tragedy to an already somber history. During the immediate post-war period, the persecution of gay men under the Nazi regime was scarcely acknowledged, let alone extensively documented or discussed. The focus of the world understandably gravitated towards the genocidal campaign against the Jewish population, leaving the narratives of other victimized groups, including gay men, obscured in the shadows of history. As we reflect on this chapter, it becomes glaringly evident that the post-war silence and neglect surrounding the persecution of gay men is a stark testament to the deeply entrenched homophobia that pervaded society, even in the face of the explicit demonstration of its deadly consequences. It serves as a somber reminder of the struggles faced by marginalized communities in having their suffering acknowledged and addressed, urging us to foster a world where every voice is heard, where every story is told, and where justice is extended to all, without exception.